We've done a Switch video in a month? So, obviously we got a little focused on Xbox Series X and PS5 news because, brand new shiny systems, but there's been a lot of stuff going on with the Switch that we have not been able to talk about for a little bit, so I really just wanted to kind of do almost a little bit of catch-up, but also talking about all the things we know or are very heavily speculating about the Nintendo Switch in 2021. So we're going to take a look at games that we know that are happening, games that might happen, obviously talk about rumors of the Switch Pro and whether or not it's really going to happen this year, bunch of stuff. To begin with, I want to talk about the one thing that is kind of a, at least partially for sure thing, what games are going on for the Switch in 2021. And it's actually, based on what we're seeing right now, looking pretty good so far. There's plenty of stuff that's definitely going to get announced further into the year, but in terms of things that are already being kind of solidified, there's a lot of strong third-party presence already going on for the Switch. Now, this is by no means an exhaustive list, but as far as games that are announced with dates for 2021, or at least slated for some time in 2021, we've got Monster Hunter Rise and Monster Hunter Stories, which just had a major reveal recently and even a demo drop for Monster Hunter Rise. Persona 5 Strikers will be happening very soon, getting its English localization. Disgaea 6 is this year. We're getting a brand new Ghosts and Goblins game with Resurrection. Bravely Default 2 is coming out soon. Rune Factory 5. Shin Megami Tensei 5, along with a remaster of Shin Megami Tensei 3. Axiom Verge is getting a proper sequel. No More Heroes 3, Spelunky 2, Windjammers 2, and even a brand new World Ends With You, which is not something I would have expected for this year. For first party, things are a little more empty right now, and in fact, the only game that we know for sure coming from Nintendo that's releasing this year is Super Mario 3D World, which is definitely something to get excited for, but ultimately that is a remake and port of a game from the Wii U. We don't necessarily have something brand new. Now, of the games that we know of that are in development that are likely coming out this year, I think the most likely thing for sure is Breath of the Wild 2. A lot of people were hoping that would have been last year. Obviously, that didn't happen, but I really think 2021 is the time for that to release, partially because when you look at the kind of history of Zelda games being released, there's usually about a 4 to 5 year gap between major releases. Sometimes it's a little shorter, or sometimes you'll get those kind of midway through releases, like how we had that remake of Link's Awakening, we got a Hyrule Warriors game last year, but as far as like the big tentpole releases of major Zelda games go, it's usually 4 to 5 years. And so it makes sense to me that Breath of the Wild 2 would have been planned for end of 2021. Outside of that, Metroid Prime 4 is still kind of a giant question mark. Bayonetta 3 isn't actually first party, but still, that's a big game people are looking forward to, and we don't know what's happening with that just yet. And there are some franchises that we just haven't heard from in a while that could potentially have new entries happening this year. As far as other big first-name Nintendo franchises go, we're also probably due for another Pokemon game of some sort this year. I don't think necessarily a brand new generation. That's going to be a little too soon, especially because we just got Sword and Shield a couple years ago. But we're definitely due for some kind of major spin-off, whether that's a remake of 4th gen, which is something a lot of people want, or even a sequel to Pokemon Let's Go, which was something that I personally really enjoyed and think it's just a good side game to kind of accompany the mainline ones. And so having one that remakes my personal favorite entry in the series, Heart Gold and Soul Silver, would be something that I really hope happens. Something else worth talking about is the fact that 2021 is also the 35th anniversary for 2 major Nintendo franchises, one slightly larger than the other: Legend of Zelda and Metroid. Now, obviously, last year they went out of their way to have this whole celebration for Mario. They did a whole bunch of different little mini games and side spin-off stuff, and the Super Mario 3D All-Stars collection. And so that, of course, seeds this thought in a lot of people's brains of, is something like that gonna happen for Zelda and or Metroid? Now, of the two, Zelda's probably going to have the bigger celebration. That's just how it is. Even though Metroid does have its dedicated fan base, Nintendo has never really been known for giving it the same level of celebration as things like Mario, Pokemon, or Zelda. The big rumor and hope for Zelda is basically following suit with what happened with Mario, where we have some kind of major 3D collection, which makes a lot of sense. After all, 2 of them have already been remade for the Wii U, so we just have to port those versions, with Twilight Princess and Wind Waker, with a potential 3rd game being Skyward Sword from the Wii getting a proper remake as well. I also don't want to fully discount the possibility that we did, after all, get 3DS remakes of Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, so maybe that's something that could get tapped into as well for the Switch. But as far as what people are thinking or hoping is going to happen, it's definitely that kind of trilogy approach like what Mario had. As for Metroid, if we were going to get any kind of major celebration or big game release, I think the big theory there is, of course, also a trilogy approach, but in their case, something that makes a little more sense, having the full Metroid Prime trilogy brought over to the Switch. This was last released on the Wii, where it brought together the pair of GameCube games, and the Wii released Metroid Prime 3. It would make a good, healthy bit of sense to have that on the Switch as well, not only as a way of celebrating the 35th anniversary, but also as a way to kind of hold people over a little bit, and also help people play some catch-up as we're waiting on finding out what exactly is happening with Prime 4. One thing I do want to emphasize about all this right now too is that because of the kind of pushbacks and delays we saw in 2020 because of COVID and all kinds of other situations, I think something that Nintendo is doing very heavily right now is playing everything very close to the chest. I don't think they're planning on announcing any games until they are very confident that the release dates are firm and set, kind of like what we saw happen last year where Paper Mario was very kind of just surprisingly announced out of nowhere on Twitter and then was released a few months later. I think we're going to see similar stuff happen this year where there's going to be games that no one really anticipates or heard about for a while, they get announced, and very shortly released after because Nintendo does not want to tempt being like, oh yeah, this game's definitely going to be ready for September this year, only to have it end up being pushed back to 2022. This also leads us into the very, very big question of this year, Switch Pro. Now, there's been all kinds of rumors that have been popping up slowly over time, but as far as kind of the recent stuff people are focusing on, there's really two big things, one for and one against. On the against side of things, there was an interview with Doug Bowser late last year, in which when asked about the Switch Pro, he was very non-committal about it. Now, the thing about this that I find very interesting is the fact that when you look at early 2020, there were very in no uncertain terms statements about the fact that Nintendo was not working on a Switch Pro. They were very clearly just like, no, this is not a thing. We don't care about this right now. We are not working on any kind of hardware revision at this moment. Whereas in this Doug Bowser interview, it's really almost more of a sort of, well, we really want to focus on the two models we have right now. They're both selling well. These are things that we're leaning into. We're just not really, we're looking at hardware and technology, but we're really focusing on the platforms we have right now, which certainly implies the idea that they're not focusing on a Switch Pro, but it doesn't really outright deny it. Now, as far as proof, or at least signs of a Switch Pro happening this year, the big thing recently was a recent data mine, which pointed towards the possibility of upcoming Switch hardware that pushes to higher resolutions. Now, when this data mine initially happened, there were all kinds of articles that started poking up that were just kind of outright saying, this confirms it, we're getting a brand new Switch Pro with 4K visuals and an OLED screen, and it's gonna have a bigger battery, and none of this is actually backed up by the data mine at all. And in fact, even the guy who did the initial data mine, Skyers, has gone out of his way on Twitter to tell people, no, this isn't really what I said or discovered at all. There's signs of the Switch supporting higher resolutions, but this by no means is any kind of hard evidence or proof that we are getting a Switch Pro anytime soon. Does this mean the Switch Pro is a possibility? Absolutely, but what form it takes and when it's released is definitely something that people are grasping at straws a little bit about. Now, as far as my personal take goes, as far as whether or not we're getting a Switch Pro this year or what the chances are, whatever, it depends on what you mean by a Switch Pro. I don't think we're going to see Nintendo release any kind of full-blown revision of the regular Switch that features a higher resolution screen with OLED and 4K visuals in dock mode. I don't think we're going to see a full replacement like that. The regular Switch, as is, has been selling perfectly fine, and there really isn't any reason to replace that just yet because, sure, releasing a revision would make people who own the original version want to upgrade, but that's true even if they released it 2 years from now. So if the regular one and the Lite are selling fine right now, there isn't really a reason to replace that just yet. What I do think is a possibility is something that I've talked about a couple of times in the past in regards to a new Switch model coming out that is a third option. Instead of being a full revision or replacement or upgrade of a regular Switch, it's basically an opposite version of the Switch Lite, which is a permadocked option. For people that don't necessarily care about playing in portable or the ability to switch between, you offer a version that is able to cut down on certain aspects of the cost because it doesn't have a screen, it doesn't have a portable battery, but you can instead focus on upping the performance of the system to do things like support 4K resolution, as well as maybe adding a little more stability to some frame rate performance in some games, and hopefully also up the internal storage because the initial bit on a Switch is just not enough. This acts as a way of being an enticing new option for people that really care about the idea of supporting 4K visuals on a TV, but doesn't necessarily outright replace the utility of the original Switch model, which could maybe get some kind of quiet revision like it did back in late 2019, but again, I don't think we're going to see any kind of full-blown refresh this year because Nintendo doesn't really need it. Could I be wrong? Absolutely. I don't think that a full-blown revision is completely off the table. I just personally don't see it happening. Now, we've talked about software and hardware, but something else I think is worth also talking about is just sort of general services and OS stuff for the Switch. And in particular, there's really just one big kind of mystery thing right now that's leading to some people conspiracy theorize a little bit about what Nintendo might be planning or doing, and that's what's going on with all the games being removed on March 31st. One of the big deals again about last year was celebrating the 35th anniversary of Mario, and so one of the big releases tied to that was the Super Mario 3D All-Stars Collection, which is a limited item, not just physically, but also digitally, in that as of March 31st and afterwards, it's just going to be gone from the shop. Which is weird. There's all kinds of rants and stuff I'm sure you guys have seen about how it's anti-consumer or it's a problem and why it's a bad thing to do, but ultimately at the end of the day, that's just a weird thing to do, right? To take this collection of games that you know will sell well, that people enjoy, and to be like, hey, guess what? We're not actually gonna keep selling this because celebration? Which is really the only big reason they've given for why they're doing it, which of course has led to all kinds of rumors and theories about maybe something else is in the works for later this year, whether that's adding additional forms of emulation for older systems, maybe not necessarily N64, but maybe for GameCube and Wii games. There's all kinds of ideas that we might be seeing more ports happen of classic games, and the reason why that collection is going to go away is because a lot of those games are going to become replayable in some other form. Of all the different rumors and theories about this year so far for Nintendo, this is definitely the one that I'm the most sketch about in general, primarily because it's rooted in the concept of something going away and hoping or assuming that something is going to take its place. Switch Pro, I think is a possibility. Big games that we want to see come back, definitely a possibility. A new form of virtual console or other Nintendo systems getting representation in Nintendo Switch Online. I hope that something like that happens because there's a lot of games from the old Nintendo library that while I have access to them in their retro form, I would love to have a portable Switch version of them. But as far as official news from Nintendo goes, and even just, sources of things that might seem plausible, this is definitely something that doesn't really have any feet to stand on just yet. Between this mysterious date, the 35th anniversary of a pair of major Nintendo franchises, the currently empty-looking, but probably not actually empty list of upcoming first-party games for the year, and of course, all the rumors and hopes of a Switch Pro, there is a lot that could happen for Nintendo this year that I am really excited for. A lot of this could actually end up not panning out, and maybe some of it is stuff that's going to happen, but not just quite in 21. Some of it could be for 22 eventually, but as far as the possibilities of what we might be seeing for 21, I think Nintendo has a potentially very strong year.